In today's video, we're going to tell you about a young man who developed a mysterious and extremely rare disease. This is a story of courage, perseverance, and a journey to find answers in the darkness of the unknown. The disease that this young man suffered from was not only a strange medical phenomenon, but also had a lot more to it than the symptoms on the surface. However, before we start the story, if you are a fan of mysterious, strange, and dark stories, you have come to the right place. This is all about discovering and sharing interesting and unexpected things through unique stories. We post new videos every week, so don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. If you love mystery and want a little surprise, like this video, we promise to surprise you even more. A fateful afternoon. On the quiet afternoon of July 29, 2016, a day like any other in the northwest of Germany, Felix, a promising 23-year-old engineering student at a prestigious university, walked into the break room of the industrial manufacturing company where he worked part-time. It was a large company, famous for its advanced automated production lines, but at the same time, a place where Felix always felt out of place. A normal day? The break room was located at the end of the second floor, small and simple with a long wooden table, a few plastic chairs, and an old refrigerator that hummed when the engine was running. The ivory white walls were stained with time, a few peeling patches revealing the plaster behind. In that space, Felix, like every day, began his familiar routine, preparing a light meal. He opened the nearly empty cereal box, poured a sufficient amount into a bowl, and headed to the refrigerator. Felix carefully took out his lactose-free milk, checking the label as a habit. Since he was a child, his digestive system had been lactose intolerant, and any mistake in choosing the type of milk would result in terrible stomach aches. After pouring the milk into the cereal bowl, Felix walked to the long table where his two older colleagues, Otto and Klaus, were sitting. Otto, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and deep-set eyes, always looked tired as if the burdens of life had drained his energy. Klaus, sitting across from Otto, was a large man with a cold face, quiet and always unapproachable. Felix had tried many times to strike up a conversation with them, but the result was always curt answers or even silence. Attempt to connect. The atmosphere in the break room today was no exception. Otto and Klaus ate their sandwiches in silence, not bothering to look up as Felix sat down. An awkwardness pervaded the small space. Felix could sense the difference in age and personality, but he tried to break the awkward silence. "Hello, guys. How are you today?" Felix asked, his voice trying to sound casual. Klaus didn't look up, just shrugged nonchalantly. Otto looked at Felix for a moment, a slight frown on his face before replying, "I'm not feeling well. Headache, stomach upset, tired all over." Felix nodded awkwardly, feeling like an outsider in this short conversation. He replied with genuine concern, "Oh, I'm sorry. I hope you feel better soon." However, his reply only caused the room to fall silent again. Felix looked down at his bowl of cereal, feeling suffocated and unable to connect with his two colleagues. Unexpected pain. Just as he finished eating and was about to get up to go back to work, Felix felt a sharp pain in his stomach. The pain was sudden and intense, as if an invisible hand was squeezing his intestines. Felix winced, gripping the edge of the table to keep his balance. His mind immediately went to the milk carton. Could he have made a mistake? But no, he had definitely checked it out. The milk was lactose-free, and Felix was always careful about that. He tried to take deep breaths to ease the pain, telling himself that it was just a mild stomach reaction. However, The pain did not subside and instead grew more intense. Felix, are you okay? Otto suddenly spoke, showing concern for the first time that day. Klaus turned to look at him, his eyes filled with doubt and worry. I don't know, Felix said, his voice weak. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, and his face paled in just a few minutes. Felix struggled to stand up, but his legs were shaking as if they had no strength left. Otto quickly put down the sandwich and approached Felix. Sit down. You don't look well. Felix listened to Otto, but a vague anxiety began to rise in his heart. What was happening to him? Was it the cereal or the milk? Or was there a more serious problem that he couldn't foresee? Felix clutched his stomach, feeling each pain like a knife cutting through it. Klaus, who was usually quiet, couldn't sit still. He took out his phone and prepared to call an ambulance. Meanwhile, Otto placed his hand on Felix's shoulder, gently but firmly. You need to see a doctor right away. This isn't normal. Felix, in pain, could only nod weakly. The bowl of cereal was now forgotten on the table, while the atmosphere in the break room had turned from awkward to tense and anxious. An unsettling change. Felix felt sweat trickle down his forehead, and each breath became more difficult. The pain was not only in his abdomen, but also spreading to his back and chest. He tried to focus on what Otto was saying, but everything seemed to blur before his eyes. Felix felt like he was about to faint. Otto turned to Klaus, urging, Have you called an ambulance? He's not doing well. Klaus nodded and put the phone to his ear. This is the manufacturing plant in the North Industrial Zone. We need an ambulance immediately. Someone in the break room is having severe abdominal pain and difficulty breathing. His voice was firm but urgent, reflecting the seriousness of the situation. Meanwhile, Otto continued to encourage Felix. Try to breathe steadily, Felix. The ambulance will be here soon. You have to try to stay conscious. Felix replied weakly. I don't understand. I only ate cereal with milk. It can't be. Otto frowned. Cereals and milk can't cause this. It could be something else. Did you eat anything strange today? Felix shook his head, but the action made him feel even more dizzy. No, just the usual breakfast. The anxious waiting minutes. Each minute seemed to drag on forever. Klaus stood near the door, observing Felix's condition while listening to the distant sound of the ambulance. Otto continued to act as a support, using a small bottle of water to cool Felix's forehead. Do you have any medical history, Felix? Otto asked, trying to find more clues. Felix shook his head weakly. Just lactose intolerance. But I definitely checked the milk. Otto and Klaus exchanged glances. Neither of the older men said anything, but their eyes were filled with concern. This was no simple case, and they knew it. The ambulance arrives. Less than 10 minutes later, the sound of an ambulance siren broke the oppressive silence. 2 paramedics rushed in, carrying a stretcher and emergency equipment. They examined Felix, asked a series of questions, and recorded his symptoms. He could have food poisoning or a severe allergic reaction. One of the paramedics told Otto and Klaus, We're taking him to the hospital right away. Can you contact his family and let them know? Otto nodded. I'll take care of that. Felix was lifted onto the stretcher, his eyes half closed, but he could still hear the murmurs of the people around him. Questions raced through his mind. What happened? Was it the milk, the cereal, or something else that he couldn't figure out? An unpredictable journey. As the ambulance left the industrial area, Otto and Klaus watched, each lost in their own thoughts. The break room, which had been filled with tension just minutes before, was now eerily quiet. This event had turned a normal day upside down, opening up a series of unsolved mysteries. Felix, Otto, and Klaus all knew in their hearts that this was just the beginning. Felix had always been a healthy, hard-working man with no history of serious illness. However, about 2 weeks ago, things began to change. Felix felt more tired than usual, and a strange nausea followed him throughout the day. There were slight pains in his arms, accompanied by an unpleasant tingling sensation. At first, Felix thought he was just overworking himself. On his mother's advice, he decided to see his family doctor for a checkup. After asking about his health, the doctor prescribed some vitamins and suggested that he rest more. But these simple measures did not help. In the following days, Felix's condition worsened. The tingling in his hands did not subside, but spread to his forearms. Felix began to feel that he had no control over his body, and this worried him. One morning, Felix decided it was time to get out of this constant state of suffering. He told himself that today would be different. He wanted to get out of bed, shower, eat a decent meal, and have a normal day like everyone else. But as soon as he hit the ground, it became clear his body wasn't working the way it wanted it to. Felix staggered toward the bathroom, but his legs refused to obey. Every step was a battle, and his body kept slipping, forcing him to hold onto the wall to keep from falling. Finally, Felix couldn't take it anymore. He tried to get back into bed, but he couldn't stand. He fell to the floor and had to crawl painfully back to his bed. Once he was settled in bed, Felix picked up the phone and called his mother. This time, he wasn't just asking for advice, he was begging for help. "I'm not okay, Mom. I need you to take me to the hospital." That afternoon, Felix lay in his hospital bed, his mother sitting next to him. A neurologist walked into the room, concern in her eyes. After listening to Felix describe his symptoms in detail, the doctor began a preliminary examination. The doctor asked about Felix's medical history, possible substance use, and whether Felix had recently suffered a head injury. But none of the answers provided any clues. Felix had experienced any events that could explain his condition. Next, the doctor poked Felix's hand to test for sensation. But no matter what the doctor did, Felix could not feel pain or any sensation other than a tingling sensation. When the doctor tested the muscle reflexes in his legs, he found that they were very weak, almost non-existent. Finally, the neurologist sighed and said, "I think your nervous system, possibly your brain or spinal cord, is inflamed. That would explain the symptoms you're experiencing. But to know for sure, we need to do more tests." Felix was admitted to the hospital for observation and further testing. 6 days later, the neurologist returned to see him. But as soon as he entered the room, he realized Felix's condition had worsened. He lay there, his body limp, his face swollen, his eyes glazed over, staring into space. The neurologist ordered brain imaging and found that both his brain and brain stem were severely inflamed, as he had originally suspected. What puzzled the doctor, however, was the cause. Tests showed no signs of any kind of infection. "My theory is that you're having an autoimmune reaction," the neurologist told Felix and his mother. "This happens when the body's immune system attacks its own cells. But we have no way to test for it for sure. And even if it is, it's very difficult to treat." The neurologist prescribed some anti-inflammatory drugs in hopes of reducing the swelling in his brain. But Felix knew this was not a cure. The days that followed in the hospital were filled with pain and frustration. Felix endured not only physical pain, but also fear for the future. This mysterious disease robbed Felix of his ability to work, his mobility, and his confidence. But he still hoped that somewhere there was an answer, a treatment, a chance for him to be himself again. Felix's story is a testament to the complexity and unpredictability of the human body. Sometimes, medicine cannot always provide immediate answers, but with patience and hope, Felix believed that he would find a way out of this battle. In September 2016, Felix, a quiet and diligent man who had been a dedicated employee at a local manufacturing company, was facing the most terrible challenge of his life. His health was seriously deteriorating, and all the efforts of the medical team seemed to be in vain. Since Felix first started showing symptoms in July, no doctor had been able to determine the cause of his condition. Felix spent most of his time lying in bed, unconsciously fighting indescribable pain. Over the past few months, his body seemed to be trapped in a cycle of fatigue and weakness. The doctors, who were initially patient and dedicated, finally gave up, calling it a medical oddity that they could not explain. However, in the midst of the impasse, there was still one doctor who did not want to give up. He was the only one who still believed there was an answer, that Felix's illness was not inexplicable. He embarked on a quest for truth, scouring thousands of medical studies, hoping to find even the tiniest clue. One day, sitting in his office, his eyes lit up as he came across an article in an old medical journal. The article described a rare case, a patient who had experienced the exact same symptoms as Felix, from the initial abdominal pain and nausea, to tingling in his arms, loss of coordination in his legs, swelling of the brain, a metallic taste in his mouth, and finally, kidney and liver failure. It all matched Felix's course of events so perfectly, it was like a perfect replica. However, there was one thing that made the doctor hesitate. The disease was so rare that only 3 cases had been reported worldwide in the past century. That Felix had it seemed impossible. But despite the rarity, the doctor decided to run a simple blood test to rule out the possibility. And then, the results left him speechless. Felix did indeed have this rare disease. It was a shocking diagnosis, not only because of its unique nature, but also because of the despair it brought. There was no treatment available. For Felix, it was a death sentence. But what was even more horrifying was the realization that if Felix had this disease, it was very likely that others in his living or working environment were also at risk. The doctor immediately contacted the police. An investigation began on an unprecedented scale. Forensic technicians were sent to every location Felix had ever been to. They tested everything: the air, the water, the food, and even the surfaces Felix might have touched. However, all the results were negative. There was no trace of poison or disease-causing agent. Meanwhile, Felix's condition continued to deteriorate. By late September 2016, he was in a vegetative state. His family was devastated, and doctors and investigators were helpless. The investigation dragged on for years, but yielded no results. Felix remained there, motionless, and the mystery of his illness was increasingly lost. In May 2018, the spring sun flooded the glass buildings of the industrial park where Elias worked. That day, as usual, Elias brought his lunch to the company break room. It was a simple lunch, just a wrapped sandwich and a juice box. When he opened it, he noticed something was wrong. A strange, pale, powdery layer stuck to the bread. Elias frowned. At first, he thought it might be leftover flour, but this powder seemed different. It wasn't as fine as flour, and it didn't resemble any seasoning he had ever encountered. Suspicion rose. He picked up the slice, examined it more closely, and realized that the taste was off as well. Not wanting to make a big deal out of it, but not wanting to ignore it either, Elias decided to call the police. Maybe I'm just being overly cautious, he thought, but his instincts urged him to act. A police team arrived quickly, armed with testing equipment and forensic equipment. What they discovered next sent Elias and the company into an unprecedented nightmare. When the police closely examined the powder on Elias's sandwich, they discovered that it was a dangerous chemical compound containing lead, which could cause serious health damage if consumed. The incident did not stop there. Elias recalled the strange change in the health of two of his colleagues, Otto, who had complained of feeling unwell for a long time, and Felix, who had fallen into a mysterious coma 2 years earlier. The police began to investigate further. The focus of the investigation quickly turned to Klaus, one of the colleagues with whom Felix had had his last lunch before falling into a vegetative state. When the investigation team arrived at Klaus's house, they initially found nothing suspicious. The house looked normal, if a little plain. However, when they went down to the basement, a scene shocked everyone. The basement was transformed into an underground laboratory with a large metal table filled with measuring cups, electronic scales, and other chemical instruments. In the back, wooden shelves were filled with glass jars, paint cans, and old mayonnaise bottles. Inside these mismatched containers was a collection of dangerous chemicals that experts said were more toxic than the chemical weapons used in World War I. Searching Klaus's basement, the police found diaries, documents, and traces proving that he had been conducting dangerous experiments for many years. According to the notes, Klaus not only purchased toxic chemicals online, but also mixed them into extremely dangerous compounds, then tested them on his colleagues. Felix was the first victim and also the one who suffered the most severe consequences. What seemed like a rare disease was actually the result of acute mercury poisoning. Klaus had added pure mercury to Felix's cereal, which he did not realize he had eaten without realizing it. Within weeks, Felix began to show symptoms such as tremors, fatigue, and then fell into a coma. Otto, another of Klaus's co-workers, was not spared. In Otto's lunch, Klaus mixed lead and cadmium, causing Otto to suffer headaches, nausea, and severe health problems. Elias, luckily, discovered the abnormality and promptly called the police before things got worse. In March 2019, Klaus was brought to trial and sentenced to life in prison. However, the heartbreaking thing is that Felix has not woken up after 3 years in a vegetative state. Otto and Elias, though they survived, still face long-term effects from the poisoning, including neurological problems and declining health. When the verdict was handed down, a judge described Klaus's actions as chemical nightmare, likening them to the worst atrocities of war. What made it all the more heartbreaking was that Klaus never explained the real reasons or motives behind his actions. Elias, though he survived, could not forget what had happened. He regularly visited Felix in the hospital, bringing photos and stories to tell his friend. Although he did not know if Felix could hear them, Otto tried to return to a normal life, but often struggled with anxiety and pain. The story of Klaus and his crimes became a cautionary tale about the dangers of indifference, greed, and immoral behavior. For people like Elias and Otto, they just want to regain the lost peace, a dream that seemed simple but is now too far away. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch today's episode. We truly appreciate your comments, thoughts, and feedback, because you are the biggest source of motivation for us to continue making better quality content every day. If you have any special thoughts or feelings about today's story, please feel free to share them with us in the comments section below. We read every comment and always look forward to hearing your perspective. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any content in the future. See you in the next episodes. Wishing you a wonderful and energetic day.